Welcome to the Huntley Leadership Podcast. It's great to be with you today. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. I love our faith. You know, one of the things that I find so fascinating about our faith, and in many ways different about our faith, is the creativity and beauty that marks our history. And I think beauty is one of the ways that God reveals himself. And there are some people in life who are far more gifted at creating that space and creating those opportunities to bring that to light and life. And today I'm so blessed to have Anthony D'Ambrosio with us. He is the writer and director of the movie called Triumph of the Heart. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Ron.
We're going to have a wonderful conversation, and you're going to want to stick around because there are different components of his story that I'm going to want you to hear as an individual, as a layperson, but also as a leader in the church.
Welcome to the Huntley Leadership Podcast, helping leaders be a positive catalyst in the people they support, the organizations they serve, and the communities they live. This podcast will make you think, laugh, and grit your teeth with new determination to make your parish or business a place of transformation, passion, and purpose. If you're still breathing, you are powered for impact.
I guess the first question I want to ask you, Anthony, is what started to draw you in this direction of creativity?
You know, I think that the Holy Spirit always is drawing people towards creativity. There's something that I really believe deep down that that the Holy Spirit and the gifts that we've been given in our baptism and our confirmation, that is what makes us creative. That our being in the image and likeness of the Creator Himself puts all of us in a place of being gifted with creativity. And of course, there's particular industries that are sort of like the creative industries. And I think that division is a little bit of a, unfortunately, it gives a lot of people the ability to cop out on creativity because it's a little bit, there's always insecurity in creativity. You're stepping into something that is mysterious and walking off the cliff into a place of faith, and ultimately trying to seek to build a vision of something that God has given you in the world, and that can operate through many different ways. Being the creator of a family or the leader of a community. All of these are ways that people can be creative. So I was drawn more specifically into the industry of filmmaking and of communications, though, because I just saw, as I was doing youth ministry and getting like very deeply involved in parish life, that that as a culture in the church, I think we are have been very influenced by the Enlightenment, by the Protestant Reformation. And of course, those things were very iconoclastic and moved the culture of the West to this incredibly logical and perhaps even didactic way of approaching life. And the church has always been incarnational and sacramental, which is a very different way of approaching things. And of course, the intellect and theology, apologetics, these are all very important, but it has been very true that throughout the course of history, the way that God has communicated with us as people and brought us to conversion has been through sacrament, through flesh and blood, through symbol. And that is the language of beauty. And unfortunately, in our current state and culture in the church, we've really abdicated that role of being the premier communicators of beauty and communicators of truth through beauty. And so you look at the legacy of our cathedrals, and you just wonder, how have we gotten here? How are we making these ugly bulletins and sort of famous for our cheesy movies and our like horrible music in parishes? And I think we've done a really good job of becoming much more focused on becoming orthodox, which has honestly initiated a movement towards beauty in the church. But that being said, if we do not like reclaim our role as communicators of beauty, we are going to be missing the conversion of the culture. And so if we want to be evangelizers, I just saw that was necessary and was frankly a big Goliath in the church that really needed to be taken down. And of course, once you see it and believe that God can do it, God ends up like making you volunteer for it. So that's how it worked for me.
Oh, wow. That is such a crazy cool answer. I just want to go back to one of the things you said, actually, a couple of things, but I think we let ourselves off the hook with that because there's always insecurity around creativity. Honestly, you just put your finger on, because I often let myself off like, oh, I'm not creative. We got to find a creative person. And it's out of insecurity. It's like, but drawing that out of people would be a heck of a gift, because you're right. We just blow that off, and I'm guilty, and I'm never going to say that again just because of you.
Yeah. You're made in the image and likeness of the Creator, so you are creative. It's part of actually what makes you human and what makes you a follower of Christ. So, yeah.
Amen. And then we have the Holy Spirit, to your point. So I am never going to tell myself that lie again.
Yeah.
And I will, muddle around with it and just allow myself to crawl and walk and not let myself off the hook. What a great insight that is. I could stop the podcast right now, and everybody, including myself, is going to leave here a better person.
That's hilarious.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. The whole concept too of communicating truth through beauty. That's a powerful, like, boy, just rest with that for a while. Like, truth and beauty. I just watched a podcast recently with Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson. Yeah, he just wrote a book. That was a
great one. That was a great podcast. Yeah.
What did like Richard Dawkins just would not engage at all in anything that Jordan was trying to share with them. And it's like, all I believe is in facts. That's it. He's like, it reminded me of Spock from Star Trek or something. Dude, really, take a look around. But he wouldn't engage. But as I hear you talk, I hear some of the things that I heard Peterson saying about symbolism and the role it plays understanding stories and really communicating truth. And, so much of what you just said kind of came back to me from watching that podcast. And it's such, and you're saying to me, like what I'm hearing you say, Anthony, is that, as a church, we have a role to play in terms of owning that piece and evangelizing the culture. Part of that is through beauty and communicating truth. And that's part of our history, our heritage, and our call. And I'm just thinking, darn, that's big. Like, that's not, what you just said is not small. And so who are you? This is a funny question, but what makes you think you can pick up that charge? Because you've just convicted me in 3 minutes or less, and my heart's on fire right now. But why did you pick, what are you doing picking that up and believing that and communicating that? Because it's not small, Anthony.
Yeah, it's really funny. When I started Catholic Creatives, there's and Catholic Creatives, for anybody who's listening that doesn't know about it, back in 2017, I got to go to an architectural sort of invite-only, very hip thing in Dallas, where all of these young and super talented architects and designers were getting together to propose to the city some changes to the design of the city that they thought would be helpful for the culture. And of course, you're talking about something that, like, a problem that feels rather impossible. But there are these, people who are my age that got together. They put this map up on the wall. Everybody who came in signed in with one of these Kodak pictures, and they put that on the wall, and they put you got like a cup of beer and you got a big thing of Post-it notes, and you were supposed to just go up there and on the map talk about the problems of the design of the city and say, hey, I think that this highway is routed in a way that creates a big, division here between white and black. So if we want to create more integration, we should tear down the highway. People were just saying ridiculous stuff. And I thought, as I was like here, I was just seeing, wow, in my circles in the Catholic culture, we get together, and usually the main thing that we talk about is like problems in the church, and we get really salty. Like there's a jaded cynicism that
True.
marks the culture of our conversations. And I was like, these people don't have any of that. They don't have Christ. They don't have the hope that I have in the change in the world. But for some reason, they believe they can just make these ridiculous assertions about like something as big as a highway and then go to the city and actually maybe get it changed. And I was like, there's no way that these guys get like, this is stupid. I was really like measuring my own internal emotional reaction to it.
Sure.
I was reacting very negatively to it because I just felt like there's no way they could do anything. But after they did this whole, design thinking thing, they picked a couple of different ideas that they proposed to the city, and they ended up actually getting millions of dollars of funding as a group to redesign a street called South Crowder Street, and they got the actual like tearing down of the highway on a voted ballot. Of course, that didn't end up happening, but
Right.
they got it to become like a very big like movement inside of the city. And as I saw that, I was like, we could do the same thing in the church. Why don't we do that with the problems that we are seeing and that we're complaining about? Like, why don't we just try to take it on like it's something we could actually think about and redesign? And so I just put up a post saying, hey, anybody that thinks bulletins suck and are really ugly and are not like anybody that thinks that these should change, come to Dallas for a one evening event. We're going to get a design thinking professor, and he's going to lead us through the whole process of thinking through how to redesign the church bulletin. And
Yeah.
what we found was that this post went viral. There was hundreds of people that decided to come down to this event.
Come on, really?
and it's where
On church bulletin. Isn't that crazy?
people were driving literally from completely across the country to come to this thing. And we're like, we perhaps didn't fully solve the bulletin problem. As you can see that
It's a big problem.
they are exactly the same as they were back then for most places. But what we found, I think, was that the real problem that we needed to solve first was creating a movement inside of the church where creatives could feel at home, and
Oh,
where people could feel like they could be creative and to have hope. And even though I was not a agency owner that had spent years and years in the industry, somehow God just sort of gave me the flag, the banner to say, all people who believe in beauty in the church, gather here and let's talk about it. And of course, that's God ends up using the humble. I think my own lack of feeling like I was a really important voice ended up making it so that it was really disarming for a lot of the other people who were coming. If they felt like,
yeah.
I was in some way trying to create like a monopoly on the space, or to like
Right.
have a really big like business impact, then I think people wouldn't have been quite as like feel like it was as neutral of a zone, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so anyway, there's a lot to say there, but that was what kicked me off. And since then, I
Yeah.
feel like God has just sort of kept on like growing that mission and giving me bigger and bigger missions to take on. So
Oh boy,
yeah,
that excites me to no end. And part of the reason it excites me to no end, Anthony, is just as a man of faith, I just think like just believe that things are possible. Like if
yeah,
God's placing something on your heart, act on it. And there's so many opportunities if we would just stop shutting the door on ourselves. And what I'm seeing in you is this just connecting some dots, allowing inspiration to rise up in your heart, and then daring to try something.
yeah.
And yeah,
Creativity is ultimately like it's an exercising of the virtue of hope. Like if God gives you a vision of something that should be that is not, the virtue of hope is to allow yourself that painful, I guess, feeling of actually wanting to see it happen. I think that we often guard ourselves from those visions by believing that they can't happen. If we have that kind of Sarah's response to the miracle that was promised to her of a child in her old age, of laughing at it, like that could never happen. It's a great defense mechanism for not having to do anything about it or believe for it or become vulnerable to the desire for it, right? So that exercising of both faith and hope allows for creativity to come forward.
Wow, man, that's beautiful. I think about even myself, just in terms of parish renewal. Like I remember being 8 or 9 years old and singing "They'll Know We Are Christians by Our Love" as I'm marching up with all the other altar boys to fill the altar with a bunch of little rug racks, which I was one, and we'll walk with each other. We'll walk side by side. And I thought, this isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be true. But it's not true. And even as a young boy, I saw that gap. And the older I got, the more I saw it. And I remember many times, talk about copping out. Like, your language is so convicting to me, Anthony. But I literally would cry. I'd be so heartbroken by my friends leaving the church and for other churches sometimes, and our mediocrity that we would settle for, and just didn't seem to care, and it was tearing me apart. And I remember crying out to God multiple times, "Take this vision away from me. Why do I care? Other people don't care. Why do I care? I wish I didn't care, because it's crushing me.
Yeah.
And I don't have authority. I don't have influence. Please take this away."
Mm-hmm.
And I was copping out for all those years. I felt like Jonah running the other direction, because I honestly didn't think he could use me.
Right.
I didn't. Why would he use me? And I didn't think he could use me. But I hear in you, at an earlier age than me, being able to say, "Hey, why not?"
Mm-hmm.
I love that attitude.
Yeah, I
Why
mean,
not?
I think that part of it was like, I didn't think that I was taking on this massive mission. I thought I was just planning a singular event. You know what I mean? Like, I think God
Mm-hmm.
does this really great thing where if he can get you to start really small and you do something, he ends up kind of blessing it in a way that makes you all of a sudden realize that you've got a much bigger mantle on your shoulders than you intended to take on.
Gotcha.
Yeah, right. So,
And hopefully through that process, this partnership and friendship with Jesus, that makes you realize, my God's bigger than I thought he was.
oh, for sure. Yeah.
Eh?
Yeah.
So let's transition into the movie. I just think Maximilian Kolbe, what I know, and I can't wait to watch the movie. But I just think I remember hearing that story for the first time and being gobsmacked. Like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, what a beautiful story. And so, a writer and director of that movie, tell me a little bit about the movie and what your hope is for that movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's a bit of a long story in terms of how I found myself working on it, but my hopes for it are very tied to that, in that I went through a very profound faith crisis um, while I found myself becoming very ill with a chronic disease that no one knew how to help me with. It was one of these kind of weird things that are cropping up in many people now, where it's not diagnosable. Nobody knows what's happening. All the tests are coming back positive, but my life is sort of falling apart. And
Yeah.
part of the symptoms of that were not being able to sleep. It was like 2 hours of sleep per night that I was able to get. And of course, if anybody has sustained long-term sleep deprivation, they know it is like torture. And
Yes.
it is like starvation. And there's ways that I feel like when I was in that space of feeling like I was dying of this lack of sleep, that I found myself meditating on the story of Maximilian Kolbe, not from the perspective of the man whose life he saved, but from the perspective of the other men in the cell who didn't get that happy ending and who were, convicted to starve to death, but who had a saint there in the room with them while they were going through that slow and arduous and terrifying,
Mm.
like martyrdom in a way. And so I think the experience of feeling like Kolbe had entered into my suffering and wasn't taking it away, but was allowing himself to go through it with me so that I would know that I wasn't alone. That compassion that I felt from him as a saint, not just for the other men, but ultimately like for me as I was meditating on it, led me to a complete rediscovery of Christ in the midst of my faith crisis. And sort of a refounding of my faith with a very different angle than I had before. And I think that right now we are in a crisis of hope. We're living in a crisis of hope in our culture. Suicide rates, medication, sense of meaninglessness. All you have to do is look around you to know that we're in the midst of a very diabolical kind of moment in history that doesn't look like perhaps the Nazi occupation, but looks like much more of a spiritual oppression over the hearts and minds of our youth. And I felt like Kolbe's story could be a healing balm for other people in the way it was for me, and a way for people to discover a credible Christ and a credible Catholicism that is a really different image of the priesthood, a really different image of the church than perhaps what they experienced in their homes, in their parishes when they were growing up. So I ultimately wrote the script to kind of keep myself alive during that time, and ultimately found myself being given my health back, and that led to the beginning of actually making this movie a reality.
Wow. Yeah, boy. Well, I've been to your website, Triumph of the Heart, and I was just loving what I was seeing. And right away, I signed up for the newsletter. I'm thinking, this is awesome. And I want to get behind it. I want to bring the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But you tell me that story, and it makes me want to do it 10 times more.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to, like, sometimes suffering is a gift, eh? It doesn't feel like it in the moment.
Right. Yeah,
And
I think it's the mystery of suffering is it is that stumbling block, for the Gentiles. I think a lot of people grow up with a faith that is like slightly superstitious in a way where you feel like there's almost a transactional thing happening between you and God as you like deepen your faith, and you pray for miracles and you kind of see miracles happen, hear about them, and perhaps you get this underlying belief that the work of becoming a good Christian is going to somehow alleviate or preserve you from having suffering in your life, that the cancer will go away if the community prays hard enough, and that happened for this other person that I heard about, so why wouldn't it happen for me? And ultimately I think a lot of people end up having crises of faith when they see two things. One, like the hypocrisy of the church, if they begin to understand the church enough and then see people living conversely, especially leadership. But I think the other one is seeing what it feels like their prayers being completely ineffective in a moment of crisis in their lives. And that was certainly how it was for me. And I had to really come to terms with the fact that really what God promises us is suffering, but ultimately a ability to have joy in the midst of that, and a knowledge of a complete union, community, joy, like wrapping up of the story with the happiest ending of all in heaven. And I think the ability for Kolbe to love in the midst of that cell could only come from such a deep conviction and vision of that, like, future of that happy ending that could come, that would make all of this even just pale in comparison to the joy that was there.
Wow. So, I mean, again, I think to myself, well, what's the story when he was canonized, and the person he stood in for was there, wasn't he, and with his family and grandkids and great grandkids or something?
Yeah, so he was there. I mean, talk about suffering. Like, the really profoundly terrible thing about that was that Francis Guy Nietzsche, who cried out, of course, like, I have wife, I have children. Unbeknownst to him, his wife and children had already been, like, killed. They had died in the war, and so even though he survived Auschwitz, he was not ever able to be reunited to them. And he ultimately dedicated his life to spreading, the story of Kolbe into sort of making, to helping his canonization and helping the world kind of know what happened there. And so in some way, he sort of became a disciple of Kolbe through that. But his life was very much marked by grief and suffering, and was not preserved from that either, even though his life was saved.
Wow, I had no idea. And I just think about this movie and the impact that it could have in terms of the other lives it can save, the other, like you talked about this crisis of hope that we live in. And I was literally coaching one of my clients this morning who told me of a suicide that just happened in his family. And I'm just like, got the heaviness of that. And, and, and so you're right, like, it's all around us. And boy, this story that came from your suffering, this revelation that came from your suffering, that saved your faith, that presented Jesus in a new way for you. Boy, I just can't help but think, how many more lives is Kolbe going to change through you? Is God going to change through him, through you, through this movie, as we strive to get behind it? So in this movie, a couple of things. One, you have people from Chosen, Hunger Games, Mission Impossible. Tell us a little bit about that. That's some pretty exciting impact movies in the world. So tell us a little bit about how some of those folks how do you know them? How have they inspired you? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of a, it's not as amazing of a story as you might think. Well, there are a few of them that are. Just being in Dallas, right? That's where The Chosen is also from.
Right.
And my producer, that I worked with on many other short films before working on this, there was a time when I was, like, ill and I was working on the script, and she,
Yes.
Stopped working with me and went and worked with The Chosen, and was just, hired by them. So she ended up being on their team and was therefore able to connect us with, whenever I called her up and was like, hey, that short film we did about Maximilian Kolbe, I have a feature length script, and I think you should produce it. And she was like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's do it. Not thinking that was going to be a 3-year like tribulation, but she was able to bring many people from The Chosen into our kind of purview. But the Hunger Games, that was when we were in Poland. One of the interesting things about the moment that we were shooting, all of Hollywood was shut down because of all of these strikes. And so there were many people who were really incredible craftspeople that couldn't work and that weren't on other productions that found their way to us. So one of them was, I'll talk about the Mission Impossible guy. We were shooting all of the scenes that are sort of outside in in Auschwitz, outside of the cell where a lot of the movie takes place inside of Kolbe's cell and these conversations he has with these other men. But we had quite a few scenes that are, in Auschwitz. And for those scenes, we had, hundreds of extras, hundreds of people from the cast and crew who were involved. We had to shut down a street of a city, and we were taking over this kind of old apartment complex that had a similar structure to Auschwitz that we're using as our set. And a lot of the things that we were doing required people being hit. Like, it's a incredibly physical kind of moment. And unfortunately, like in the evil of Auschwitz, there's a lot of beating that would happen. And so a lot of that is stunts. And we had all these extras who, are not actors, who are not trained stunt people. And if you, it's like actually being hit and looking with it being safe, and then it also looking real, but not being real. That is actually very hard to do. And it would ruin the movie if we did not have very believable violence with safety. So we needed a stunt coordinator that could help us do that effectively. And I won't go through all the background, but we had a freak snow that made us have to reschedule, and we lost the person that we were going to work with for that. And we had to find another person 3 days before we were reshooting it.
My.
And this person was referred to us, who I was skeptical of. I had negotiated with a lot of Polish people at this point, and they can be tough cookies. So I was a little bit intense in the first interview call with him, not really knowing his background. And he was just super nice and kind, very fatherly. And then after the call, I looked at his IMDb and realized that he was the stunt coordinator for Mission Impossible. And apparently he had come back from LA. He was Polish, and his team was Polish, and they lived half in Poland, half in LA, and they came back because of the strike. So he loved Maximilian Kolbe and wanted to help contribute to him, and ended up coming and really making that whole experience and working with all those extras feel just so real, terrifyingly real. So when you see those scenes and you get choked up and nauseated by it, you'll realize that was this guy that made all of that feel so believable. So yeah. But all of these other people that came to the project it's similar things, just people who love Maximilian Kolbe, or who love the mission of what we're doing and hear about it just through the network of the Catholic world or the film world, and just find their way to it. God really just made that happen for us. So that was it.
Doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful how all these little miracles kind of add up. And so you do have something, there is a bit of a mission behind it. It's not just it's a huge undertaking what you're doing. It's so exciting. Yeah. But yet there's something more to what you're doing. You're trying to rally Catholics and have an impact. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess there's obviously the missional aspect of the movie itself to spread hope through sharing Kolbe's story with the world. There's an economic and sort of more industry related mission that's also a part of this that I'll talk about, which is just that, going back to what we were talking about with cathedrals, cathedrals were what the church used to communicate the truth of the gospel to the people, and not just cathedrals, but old churches were made to be these incredible collaborations of every part of industry. The entire city would be involved in the creation of their church. And every industry is used in that. It's the same thing in film. I would say that film is kind of like our modern equivalent to that that older medium. And if we want to tell the story of the church to the modern heart, we have to use the medium that the modern heart is using to digest values, cultural values. And that is, film. And I would say slightly, video games and other like ways of being immersed in a narrative are also coming about. But film is still kind of the premier version of that in our culture. And it's the same thing. It takes an entire economy to be able to make a movie that is good. And unfortunately, we don't have anything set up in terms of influence in the economy of filmmaking.
Right.
And unfortunately, what that means is that when we do make saint movies, which happens every once in a blue moon, it's because a billionaire decides they want to put $40 million into something like Cabrini, and they know that they're going to probably lose a lot of it because we don't have a distribution
Mhm.
ecosystem that's created to get these movies out there in a way that's sustainable. So what
Yes.
happens is all of that money gets sucked up, and it's we have to wait for the next billionaire to kind of retire and decide they want to make a saint movie. And of course, that person tends to be, because they're bringing all the money, they're the one sitting over the shoulder of the creative team. And they've got 3 or 4 other people in that are like sitting over the shoulder of the creative team, and they kind of say, we're going to do this is how we're going to do it, rather than it being this more like groundswell up into the story, which is more of how
Mm.
ours is. And so it means that we aren't building an ecosystem that allows us to do more of them. It's not sustainable.
Right.
And so what we thought was, if we were to make a film that was as entertaining and as beautiful and as intense as Cabrini, which cost $40 million for $400,000, we could actually have a real shot at making money for investors. And if we
Right.
were to do that, we would see a huge influx of people being willing to invest in movies. Right now, as I go around talking to people in the Catholic world, investors, et cetera, everybody's like, I love what you're doing. I just don't invest in film just by like nobody. It's the best way to just lose all of your money. And there's
Right.
a real truth to that, because so far, for all of the faith-based things that have been done, they're taking these huge whacks. Like, let's do a $16 million movie. Let's do a $50 million movie. These all are saint things. They're period pieces. They require, huge sets. We have to recreate New York City in the 1800s with big drone
Mhm.
shots and stuff. Like, that takes so much money, millions of dollars, just for the little, like, they're walking down the street and somebody gets in the car or whatever. Like that, all of that, every single piece of that you're seeing was paid for, right? The
Right.
costumes, the extras, the cars, the like, all
Yeah.
of the storefront faces, the VFX to sort of help cover up the skyscrapers in the background, all of that stuff. So all that to say, we're approaching it with a very humble like budget and a much more ministry oriented mode, where everybody
Mm.
is living on soup, literally. Like, we couldn't even pay for dinner for our team. We just had
Yeah.
broth at night when we were done our 16-hour like days, um,
Wow.
and we're approaching it much more as this crowdfunded, crowdsourced, volunteer, ministry oriented project that would allow for us to really change the way that Catholic films are made and funded. And by creating a proof of concept like this, and really having a shot at, a really good shot at making money with it, that puts us in a position to be able to make a lot more. So that's part of it. That's part of the mission here.
I'm glad you're bringing this up because, I sometimes I go unformed and glad for them, and I'll think, oh, I'm going to watch a Saint movie, and it's just so quirky and goofy. It's like I
Mm-hmm.
can only watch it for 15 minutes, and it's like, okay, I can't take it anymore. I'll read a book. Like, that's just so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And although my heart's in the right place, and I attempt, but I'm hearing you say something. You're shooting for an experience that is beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
done really well, and communicates truth and moves hearts. And because of that, you're wanting to you're coming up with an innovative way to make these movies The other piece is funded and crowdfunding. And so I'm thinking to myself, again, I'm going to get behind this because I just think it's so cool. But there's that network piece too, in terms of how it's consumed. Like there's no ecosystem even for that. And I know, we talked about The Chosen a little bit. They launched the last series in the movie theater. And so as a church, my buddies in the church, hey, let's get together. Let's get behind this because we want to support Christian movies and Christian content. And so we did. And so every 2 weeks when the next one came out, we'd all get together, go down to the movie theater and watch it. And so I think there is an increasing hunger and openness and willingness. But let's talk a little bit about that and what you hope and what you'd like to see there.
Yeah,
In terms of this. Yeah.
we are at a moment where a renaissance is really possible. And frankly, there's been different moments like this when a movie comes out or a show comes out that really galvanizes the Catholic or Christian audience. The Passion,
Yes.
The Chosen was a good example. There's a movie that came out called Bella when I was in high school that did the same kind of thing. A lot of these things independently produced, somehow a miracle of miracles, they got done. The money came together and the right team came together, and God blessed it, and it came out. But unfortunately, after all of these moments, there's always been everybody's like, yeah, we're going to see a lot more of these. And then 2 or 3 other things come out that actually bomb. And then we're back at square one, and there's silence for another 5 years. And everybody says that one thing that happened, that was the exception. Nobody can duplicate that. And I think that the real problem there is just that none of these ecosystems, or none of these movies have created an ecosystem. None of them have created a distribution platform that collects all of that data and all of those emails and all the kind of relationships, and then prepares for the next movie. They're all reinventing the wheel, so to speak. The Chosen did that with Angel, but then of course there was some problems there, and they had to part ways. So there's still this massive hole in the market right now. If you think about what Disney and Netflix, they're a combined marketing or market cap of I think $500 billion. And you got to think that at least half of that market is conservative. So you're thinking maybe that's about $250 billion worth of the market that's not being served. That's been completely, shoved to the side by kind of the ridiculous propaganda movement that's been happening in Hollywood, and that's taken over all of these institutions. So it's there, but for some reason, the conservative world has not decided we're going to get behind the creation of a distribution studio like Disney that is going to not only make movies, but also is going to distribute them. And so part of our goal is to create a course for people to be, not a course in terms of learning, but I mean a path for people to distribute movies that are Catholic and saint-based, and by doing that ourselves in a way that is that helps to not just be smart and innovative and really different from how other people have done it, but also allows us to keep a lot of the data and a lot of the work that has already been put in on the distribution of the movie. So if we're successful with this, we actually get to be able to do it more after.
Beautiful. And so so for those people that are listening right now, how can we get behind this? How can we get involved? What would you like to see, and how can we help?
Yeah, there are 2 things. One is we need investment for our theatrical release. Right now, the main thing that we have to do in order to get out of the stratosphere and really have that path towards the Renaissance that I was talking about before, we have to have a very successful theatrical release. Right now, because there is no other distribution company where it's not like Netflix and Amazon are like, oh, please, we desperately want a really dark, artistic, faith-based movie. No, they think faith-based, it needs to be Hallmark. That's what faith-based people want. So like that's what will fund and get made, and we have a path for that. We've seen how that works. This whole, artsy, like deep, really profound kind of artistic angle on a thing, we're not looking for that. We're not going to spend money for that. So they're not lining up at the door trying to buy something like this. And the only way that you get out into all of these places where people are consuming media is by proving to them that there's a market through a really powerful theatrical release. And that means opening weekend, frankly. The Catholic world, we are driven by word of mouth. We're driven by hearing that somebody else liked it, because we are motivated by not being the first people to like something, but we want to be after 2,000 of years of people saying you should do this, that's how we know it's good, right? That does not work for the movie industry. Like we have to be the first ones to get behind something, to give it a shot, even if it's not the best thing ever. Like just showing up to say, like, we are a market that is going to get behind this kind of thing, so that the next person has another shot at getting a theatrical release. There's a real, it's almost like voting in the ballot box for Catholic films to be made. And so it's like, hey, we have to get out and vote. If we don't get out and vote on opening weekend, the movie dies. It doesn't matter how good it is. Nobody hears about it. And it'll be a moment of another moment that tells distributors and everybody in the industry, we're not going to, like, this is a great way to lose all your money, is investing in a Catholic, film project. Right. So I think that what we're looking for right now is also people who can say, hey, we're going to help get this out into our parish, make sure everybody knows about it, make sure that we're taking a group to see it when it comes out in the spring. So if you're interested in being that person, if you're the kind of like leader in your parish or in your community that knows how to get things done, then just come to our website and fill out our form saying that you'd like to help us, and we'll give you a packet and all the things that you need in order to help get the word out about the film.
Okay. That's beautiful. So first of all, I'm all in. I'm absolutely 100% going to do that.
Awesome.
So if you that are listening to think, damn, I can do that, then do it. Go over there right now. Triumph of the Heart, and go to that website. And the trailer there is just gripping, by the way. Like, it's just such a cool trailer for this movie. And it's a great website, and that form is there. I signed up for your newsletter, and I'm going to sign up for that via Galvanizer for that launch. And that is something we can do. The other thing you talked about was this investment required for this theatrical launch. I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
And so crowdfunding, or somebody's a larger donor, what does that look like? How does that come together?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two ways that people can contribute. They can donate, just, hey, I want to see this happen. I've got $100 I'd like to throw at you in order for you guys to sustain your team throughout the next few months of getting the theatrical release put together. So
we don't want you to drink broth for supper. So
yeah. I mean, seriously, there's a group of us that are like about 10 people who are living as missionaries, working on basically minimum wage to be able to keep this going. And those donations are like mission support for us. The other angle is investing in our P&A.
Yes.
So we have to raise what they call P&A. It's like printing and advertising costs. You have to put down a certain amount of money when you're making a contract with the theaters to say, we're spending this on our advertising. And they look at that as a big measure of whether or not this movie is going to be successful. So $1 million is like the absolute minimum. We have somebody that's been willing to work with us for that as our P&A. Usually it costs about $6 million just to start going after a theatrical release. So we're still punching way above our weight with that. But people can invest in P&A. It operates like a hard money loan, where they're getting 20% back on their investment in basically around a year, maybe a little bit under a year. So it's a decent return for an investment. The minimum investment is $5,000 for that. And if you're interested in that, there's a place on our website that you can go to in the Get Involved page, where you can get the prospectus in our deck that kind of explains the whole strategy and how we're planning on making that return for you. So, yeah.
That is fantastic. Oh, that's so important. I talked to my wife about that too, all right?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, hey, it's like a tithe, where if you lose your money, then you get to write it off and it was a donation, right? But there's also the potential for it to make you some money back, which is a decent return. But in doing so, creating this kind of proof that can be done for other people, so that next time we go back to do this, we can do an even bigger project with an even bigger potential return. So, yeah.
Yeah, and to be on another way that I'm looking at it is, selfish in one sense. I'm an evangelist at heart, and I've seen that trailer, and it's gripping. And now hearing your story and how you suffered, and how God used that suffering to draw you closer to himself through this story, I'm thinking he's going to do something crazy for people who don't know him yet. And so this investing in this is going to be me investing in a tool that I think God's going to use to bring more people home to him. And that too really excites me. Like, I think God is going to speak into this crisis of hope culture. And I think souls are going to be saved because of your gift, your yes, your willingness to do the unthinkable, and our ability and belief in you and what you're doing. And so I'm just thrilled.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm really grateful for the support, and I think it's very clear that it's like a work of God, not a work of man. So I appreciate that. The trust in bringing me on, and the everything that you're doing for leadership in the church. It's a really important mission, and grateful for everybody in the audience that's working on that too. So thank you.
Amen. You're most welcome. And Jordan Peterson, if you're listening, get Anthony on your podcast and give him $1 million, would you? That would be awesome.
Actually, Matt Walsh, if you know who he is,
good.
he's
I sure do.
He posted about the movie after watching the screening in Nashville that we just did a week ago, and he came up to me and was like, "Hey, I think that Jordan Peterson will love this movie, and
I do too.
I want to put you in touch with him." So there is an actual potential there. It's something you could pray for if you want to see that happen. Maybe there is a world in which Anthony D'Ambrosio is on Jordan Peterson's podcast.
Well, in many ways, I do think there's the world. I think we currently live in that world, because from what I've watched of him, he loves guys like you. He loves what you're doing. He loves your heart. He loves your courage and your creativity and your message and why you're doing what you're doing. I don't think there's any part of him that wouldn't really appreciate you and want to get behind you. And so keep doing what you're doing. And for any of you that are listening that can help put wind in Anthony's sails in this project, then please reach out to me or him, and go to triumphoftheheart.com, and I'm sure people can reach you through that. Anthony, can they?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally awesome. So Anthony, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Ron. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you guys for listening. Thank you for what you do in the church to make your parish an amazing parish, your diocese an amazing diocese, your family an amazing family. God matters, leadership matters. God bless you, and we will see you next time.
I want to encourage you, as you lead this week, be faithful to God and generous to others. See you next time, and remember, if you're still breathing, you are powered for impact.